Hello, and thank you for joining us for the last episode of the Digital Transformation of the Legal Industry webinar series. This episode will discuss an SLW digital transformation case study in recruiting, onboarding, training, and firm communications. This is the 8th episode in an 8-part series. If you missed any of the previous episodes, you can find recordings on the SLW Institute on the SLW website. A recording of this webinar and the slides will be made available to all registrants. Feel free to enter any questions using the Q&A feature in the Zoom menu. We invite you to follow us on LinkedIn to see news about other upcoming webinars. And with that, I'll turn things over to our moderator.
Hey, thank you, Michelle. This is Steve Lundberg. Schweigman, welcome everybody. This is our last in this series, and I hope you enjoy the presentation today. We've got a really great lineup of some of our key personnel that help run all the back office and the recruiting and the training and everything else that's required to keep a firm going. And we're going to kind of go in the order of speakers today. So we're going to start out with with Garth Vivier, who's one of our principals at the firm. Garth's been on our recruiting committee for a number of years and is an expert in using various different software solutions that we've employed. So Garth will be our first speaker today, and then we're going to swing it over to Scott Otto, who's going to talk today. It is Scott next, right? I think it is. Scott will be talking about training and onboarding people into the firm. Scott's our application support specialist, has been with us a long time and is expert in all of our internal tools and tool development. I think Susan Crossan is next, or Pam, which we'll go to Susan though. Susan's our human resource manager. Susan's going to talk about the tools that she uses and how she has implemented various different software solutions to greatly increase the services to our employees and to keep things moving quickly when we onboard and support employees. Pam Huff is going to talk about infrastructure of the firm that supports the attorneys when they come in and get onboarded, and how that affects the quality of the experience for the attorneys and helps keep the firm operating at a high level. And then last but not least, Tom Ernstner, who is our Director of Information Technologies. Tom has been with us also quite a long time, and he's total expert in anything IT, and Tom's going to talk to us about issue or things that we do related to his department. So with that, without further ado, we're going to kick it off, and we'll hand it over to Garth to get it rolling.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, I think the recruiting hiring process, can make or break the success of any business, and thus any tools that can improve this process are obviously very advantageous. In a small law firm like us, we're 115 attorneys and probably a similar number of support staff. With little attrition, even then, these tools are of great help to us. But I think in larger corporations like Amazon that are aim to hire 100,000 people a year, it must be a daunting task without really good web-based hiring applications. And also the cost of hiring the wrong individual is very high. So it's really important to optimize the process. There are often recruiting fees, costs in onboarding and training employees, and many other factors that come into play. Also, in law firms, junior attorneys typically take several months before they become profitable, and in very specialized areas like we deal in, could even be up to a year. So once again, emphasizes the importance of good hiring, and one needs good tools to do good hiring. In our firm, because the importance of hiring, the entire management group is involved, located in Minneapolis, Silicon Valley, and Austin. And so we're a very geographically diverse interviewing group. And we also have satellite attorneys in 19 states who get involved in the interview process with some of the attorneys. So for us, it's almost essential to have really good cloud-based, web-based recruiting software to meet our hiring goals. And we'll touch on this later in the talk. Also you need a good video platform, conferencing platform to do the recruiting. I think the digital transformation really occurred when there was a move from purely digital software resident on maybe a single machine or a local server or whatever it may have been, to this idea of this web-based, cloud-based systems where the access to data by anyone at any time, anywhere is really important. And in our firm, we use software called, well, it was originally called Newton software, and we started using it many years ago to enhance our hiring process. I think Newton was subsequently acquired by Paycor, and as I say, it's been a great help to us in our hiring process, specifically because we're so geographically dispersed, not only in terms of the interviewing group, but also the candidates we're looking at. The hiring group can have access to writing samples, resumes, etc., all in a central platform. What has also been advantageous to us with having a sophisticated web-based hiring platform is recording when applicants apply, because we find some applicants apply several times over a number of years. We may turn them down for particular reasons. We may sometimes get a candidate who applies to the firm, start engaging in chatting with the applicant, and subsequently receive the same a resume from one or more recruiters for the same candidates. So having a timeline and a central repository where all this information is stored is very helpful for us. In the case of candidates who apply multiple times, there may be different reasons why we turn down candidates. For example, our focus at one time may be on EE because we have a hardware client that's growing and we need more bandwidth and more attorneys to service that client. A year later, it may be we're in search of mechanical engineers because our medical device practice is growing. So having a repository, a record of why we don't interview a particular individual, flagging certain individuals because we may want to revisit them later should our needs change, is really important. And without a web-based system, this would be very difficult to do, and the hiring team wouldn't simultaneously all have access to this kind of information. Also, how our hiring software allows us to monitor the progress of interviewing. If a candidate is set up for an initial interview, subsequent interviews, where they are in the hiring process, have they been onboarded, etc., accepted the offer. And so that provides us with a central place where many people can access it at any time. What we've also found is that the digital transformation has allowed us to do background research on an applicant. A very large part of our business is focused on patent preparation and filing, likewise trademark preparation and filing. And so we can research the candidate online before we interview them. Sometimes candidates tend to tailor their resumes depending on which law firm they're applying to, by checking a current employer's website, LinkedIn, and these other resources. We can see that their true experience is aligned, is or is not, I guess, aligned with what we're looking for. Also, it does occur on times where we see a contradiction in the resume, and we can then speak to the candidate and get them to explain the contradictions and why their resume and their LinkedIn profile doesn't correspond, for example. The interviewers can also post review comments directly into our platform, and so that avoids a stream of emails being passed back and forth with the comments. The comments in the platform are confidential and only viewable by certain folks. In an ideal world, I think in-person interviews are quite frankly the best, but in our current environment, that's just not possible. And quite frankly, even prior to the pandemic, we used to use video conferencing, typically Zoom, for interviews in combination with in-person interviews because of the geographical diversity of our interviewing group. I think without the digital transformation providing good software for recruiting, video conferencing facilities where a user or an applicant can be sitting at their home at a desk and just download Zoom or whatever it may be. It really has helped us meet our hiring needs. Another benefit that we've found is the ability to advertise new positions through more than just the traditional recruiter channels. Currently we advertise new job openings on websites such as LinkedIn, Patently.io, and several other places. It allows the applicants then to apply directly to our firm, and obviously that has significant cost advantages for us because we're not paying recruiting fees. I also identify, based on speaking to these candidates, which are the best channels, and obviously focus our marketing efforts on those channels. Something that has become of increasing interest in the recruiting process is artificial intelligence, or AI. This is obviously not a big deal or big value to the hiring in a firm our size. But I think in large corporations like Amazon, Microsoft, Google, Facebook, etc., where there are probably hundreds of thousands of applicants, and Amazon intent on hiring 100,000 new employees, I think the AI has a place there, or could at least help. They obviously need really good recruiting software, HR software, to manage the process. But the challenge with AI, from what I've read, is bias. And so although AI facilitates in reducing the time-consuming activities in recruiting, such as streamlining, automating the screening of resumes, matching actually applicants with particular jobs the corporation may have, I do think that there are one needs to be very cautious about using it. And there are some really cool ways that different companies have used AI in their recruiting process. Volvo, which you probably all are familiar with, the Swedish motor vehicle company, converted their Brussels Motor Show into a job fair in Belgium using their recruiting car, where candidates were interviewed by AI embedded in the car for posts of service technicians at the Volvo plant. And so this really helped them identify suitable people. They presented, during the process, they presented different concepts and asked the applicants to identify various parts through simulation. So yeah, AI was pretty useful in identifying suitable candidates. But the negative effect of AI and bias has been evident in a tool that Amazon developed. I read a Reuters article that reported that Amazon had set up an engineering team in Edinburgh, Scotland, in about 2014 to find a way to automate the process. But apparently it was quite clear from the exercise that there was a gender bias in their AI software. Not only that, actually, the computer spat out some candidates who weren't qualified for a particular position. So although I see AI becoming more and more important, I think it has a long way to go. And in fact, Amazon executives have abandoned the project in Scotland because of the results. So in summary, I think the digital transformation has greatly enhanced the hiring process, and very much so in our firm, where we have a geographically diverse interviewing group, as well as our candidates and attorneys, which we have throughout the US. And I don't think we would be able to meet our hiring needs if we weren't using this type of technology. So having said that, I'll hand it back to Steve.
Thanks, Garth. That was awesome. I thought you were going to say that the the Scottish team, their AI was heavily biased towards choosing people that like to golf or something. So, anyways, that the AI is an interesting thing, but because it does rely on training, material that is historical, it's of course going to try to stick to what's been done in the past, which isn't good when you're trying to transition, out of what you did in the past. So I think it definitely has limitations. One let's see, where is it? Scott, are you next up?
It's actually Susan.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so I got that order wrong. Okay, Susan, you're next. Yes, I guess I should have realized that from this slide. All right, Susan, let it roll. Thanks.
All right, thank you. You can go to the next slide, Michelle. All right, I always feel that the number one goal of my HR department is to make the process of onboarding a new employee as easy and as seamless as possible. Based on this goal, we currently use ADP Workforce Now as our one-stop shop for our human resources, payroll, benefits, and time and attendance. When an update is made for an employee, whether it's the employee or HR or payroll making the change, once it's approved, the information flows directly to payroll, or if the change is for a benefit, that change flows directly to the benefit provider. Some examples of options that employees can themselves use in self-serve and ADP are updating their home address, changing their direct deposit, changing their tax withholdings. They can view their pay stubs and their benefits. During open enrollment, it's completely handled online. Employees can submit time off requests, and hourly employees can enter their hours directly into their time card in ADP. Next slide. In addition to some attorney-specific training tools, we also use Cantola training for more general firm-wide training. We have access to a full library of courses that can be assigned to all employees or individual groups of employees. Once I select a course and assign who should watch it, an email is sent directly to those employees. They click on the link in the email, watch the video, take a short quiz, and their completion is noted online. Automatic reminders can also be set up for those employees who have not yet completed the course. Course topics include sexual harassment, social media, diversity and inclusion, remote work situations, and this is just to name a few. These courses are geared towards employees, they also have courses that are geared towards employees and also ones geared towards managers. Next slide, please. We've continued to hold our company events during COVID and being remote. Our staff appreciation and employee recognition events have been done virtually and will continue to do so until we return to the office. Even though we have been unable to host an in-person summer picnic or winter holiday party, we have remembered our employees with gifts geared towards their picnic or holiday themes. In addition, we have hosted weekly town hall Zoom meetings every Wednesday with company updates provided by different members of the management committee. And that's it from the human resources side.
Thanks, Susan. Much appreciated. All right, Scott, right?
Yes.
All right.
Yes, it's my turn. As Susan just kind of illustrated, our onboarding process is pretty complex. I mean, the people that come into the firm will go through a week of training on, just the HR stuff alone is probably fairly in depth. And then you get the IT side of things where they have to learn, how our network is established, and they have to get comfortable with that. And then we have our individual software items that are their tools to doing their daily job. And fortunately, prior to the pandemic, we were already comfortable with remote training and supporting users, just based on how the firm was designed from the get-go. I think I started almost, it was right before the 5th year anniversary party of the firm. And I've been at the firm for about 23 years, and we had remote employees at that time. So we already had a comfort level with that, but there were some things that we put in place right before the pandemic hit that really helped us through the pandemic, or at least as far as we are right now. Two of those things are SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. But before I get ahead of myself, the task of training the people that come in is to get them comfortable with the firm and its resources and its tools. And that's something that my group takes pretty seriously, because we are responsible for training the new employees on how to use our virtual file room, our docketing system, and our billing entry system, which is all contained in Foundation IP. And when we train them, we try to get them to follow along, especially if we're doing a virtual training, where hopefully they have 2 screens where they can follow along and do the same things that we're doing in our display that we're showing them, and get comfortable by both watching and doing at the same time. And we also need to make them comfortable with what they're bringing into the firm. So if an attorney is bringing a client with them, or a number of clients, we need to educate them on what we can provide to the clients, like custom reports or whatever custom fields we might need to track certain things the way a client wants things tracked. So we have a flexible system that allows us to do that. And being web-based, we've had Foundation IP since 2001, and it's really helped with our remote people for sure, because everyone's looking at the same thing. People can be in the same matter at the same time, looking at different things. It's very, very convenient. As far as Microsoft Teams goes, it's probably my favorite part of the pandemic for my job. I can quickly chat with somebody if I need to ask them a quick question. I don't have to send them an email and wait and wait and wait. Chat seems to be a very instantaneous way of dealing with small problems. And if somebody needs my help, I can do a quick screen share with them through Teams. I call them via Teams, have a discussion with them. I can share my screen right while we're talking. Or they can share their screen and I can figure out what might be going on their side. And then we have client-centric teams, where a subset of our people who work on a particular client house information that's important to that client. It might be fee schedules or other documentation, procedural items, and discussions about what work might be coming in, or what new guidelines we need to follow for the client. And a new person can just jump into that team and read the previous historical information and catch up and be up to speed with everyone. It's not buried in a series of emails that somebody needs to find and forward to somebody else that's new. So it's very, very convenient. And then we have our intranet, which we call Milo, which stands for Mountains of Information Logically Organized. We have our firm-wide information, some of the HR information that Susan talked about, links to the third-party solutions that we use, so people can check their, do their timesheets, or check their pay stubs, or whatever third-party tools we might be using, submitting receipts. Then we also have training videos out there. Even if it's something like, I don't know how to do a pivot table in Excel. That's a training that I did not that long ago that a lot of people didn't realize how to do that. And not only that, how much easier it made reading a spreadsheet or looking at information differently, how convenient it made all of that. And then we have forms and workflows, and those are newer additions to our processes. The forms are usually pretty easy to make. Some of them have been challenging, and the workflows are actually time savers. The last one that I did was for expense approvals. So if somebody has an expense that they would like the firm to address, they can submit the form. It goes to the person that approves those things. And when they change a couple settings in the SharePoint list, which is essentially a spreadsheet or a table, they switch the triggers, and then it will send out an email telling the person whether or not their item was approved or declined. The person that's approving really only has to look at that list, and they do get email notifications that there's a new item. Next slide, please. And then thinking about the future and what it might look like. So Kaizen is a Japanese term meaning change for the better or continuous improvement. And there are 5 founding elements of this Kaizen approach. They are teamwork, personal discipline, improved morale, quality circles, and suggestions for improvement. And then you essentially repeat this process. Is hybrid or remote the new normal? For us, it's always kind of been an element of our existence at SLW. But what we've come to realize is that now that everyone is essentially remote, we need to have better online resources. We need to have better training on demand, because not everybody's working the same hours, or maybe they work later now, or whatever the case might be. And being a person who has to be involved in many of the firm's processes, I'm not always available, or the rest of my team isn't always available to help somebody immediately. But we can point them to maybe some videos that we made for those situations. We also need better communications, more concise communications, and better ways to communicate, like SharePoint and Microsoft Teams. And then, like I said earlier, the workflows and forms that we've been working on, those also need to be better, and we're working toward making that as seamless as possible. And then the new challenge that we have, if we do come back into a hybrid model, instead of strictly being in the office and then just having our remote employees, is that the presence that's available in Microsoft Teams and Outlook, where it actually tells you if a person's available or busy or on a call, and the out of office tool that's in Outlook, those aren't necessarily enough for a day-to-day operation where you need to get a hold of somebody. What we're looking to develop is some sort of centralized employee information area that tells us about an individual, if they are on site or remote for that day, or what their schedule is for that week for being on site versus remote, their best way to be contacted, their alternative contacts, like their backup if they're going to be out. The one thing that is challenging about that is we don't want to have a person go into another area to fill in this information if they're already filling out an out of office reply for their email. But it may actually come to that until we have a better way of doing something. The key to this whole thing about not necessarily a presence, but let's, for argument's sake today, we could call it their pandemic status. Are they going to be coming into the office, or are they not? Is to allow people to not have to feel like they're always chained to work and people are calling them at all hours of the day because people are working odd hours. But also to say, if this person's supposed to be in this week, I'm gonna ask them if they want to go out to lunch with me or have a quick meeting with me in person. And this allows us to have better relationships in the strangest of times. So we're looking into how we can make that happen, how we can have people on the same page. And then again, with all the things that we're talking about, the web-based element of these things, hopefully will create a seamless experience regardless of the person's location or where they're working. When they come in the office, they will have these tools, they will be familiar with them, they know where they are. And when they're working from home, same thing. Thank you very much.
Hey, Scott, that was a really good overview of the back office you support. And I think that the number of tools that we have is just absolutely overwhelming at times. And I think back to simpler times in the law practice, and most of the people on this call wouldn't even know such times existed. But it used to be when you onboarded at a company, it was the finding where the coffee machine was, and here's the file room, here's your dictaphone, and here's your phone, and pretty much that was it. And now you've got literally a dozen major tools or more that you have to use on a continuous basis. So I think that onboarding part of our business, or of anybody's business, has just gotten to be so much more important because the learning curve of getting up to speed on all these tools is just so much more difficult. So thank you for all the hard work that you do in that regard. And it's because it's getting harder and harder to keep up. So is Pam next up?
I am, yes.
And before you go, Pam, I neglected to note a few things I wanted to note about you. But Pam also, besides being a trademark attorney extraordinaire, she runs our trademark group and they're just fabulous. Also is head of our diversity committee here at the firm and also is a member of our board of directors. So Pam has a lot of hats that she wears and does them all extremely well. So with that, Pam, have at it.
Oh, well, thank you, Steve. I was smiling when you were just talking because I don't want to say I fondly remember, but I do remember asking like, well, what drawer is the dictaphone in and where's the file room, right? That was the besides the coffee, right? So I have to say I do remember those days. Oh, I do. Next slide, please. So I started practicing about 30 years ago, and I joined Schwegman about 5 years ago. And I will tell you, I really look at that time as kind of completing my digital transformation. The firm I came from is a very good firm, relatively large firm, and we really were on what I would call more of a hybrid model. You know, we definitely had digitized documents. We have a system for those digitized documents. And of course, you know, those have been around for a long time. I mean, just being solely digitized, I think is, while some may think it's not really all that new. I mean, I think for some of us, it has been new. I mean, for me, you know, obviously, you know, 5 years ago, I went from, you know, a paper-bound environment, or at least partially paper-bound environment, to a paperless environment. The experience I had before, well, as I mentioned, you know, before with Steve, that, you know, from the dictaphone to all paper files, and then to this hybrid system where we had probably the most important documents were in the digitized system, but there was a reliance on paper files. And so what I discovered very quickly, you know, after joining SLW is that really being paperless was critical, at least to my transformation. You know, being able to have all the information in one place and not having to rely on paper in any form, you know, was critical. You know, some of you on the call may remember these days, some may not, or maybe didn't experience this, but I can tell you that, you know, being in a paper-bound practice, even if you're only partially paper-bound, where, you know, most everything is in the digitized system, but not everything, you know, there's still notes or maybe other things that could be in the paper file, required, when you wanted to work in a team, it was just a whole nother, to say it was a whole nother step would really be an understatement. You know, for instance, I wanted to put a team together that required attorneys in the city I'm in, San Antonio, working with some attorneys in Dallas. And really a team approach was going to be the best thing for the client. Well, we couldn't rely simply on what was in the digital system. So it required either scanning in the paper file or literally shipping some of the paper files to the attorneys in the other office so that we could all be looking at the same thing at the same time. You know, I think you've heard several of us mention that really having this web-based system where everyone has the same and continuous and immediate access to information is so important. I mean, that was really, you know, looking at my past was really something that, again, was so transformative for me, because it allowed me to work in teams really seamlessly. And, you know, it was unfortunate. I saw situations where folks would opt to not work in a team because of those types of steps that you would have to take to get everyone, you know, the information. So the other thing I've seen, just really being in completely a digitized system and not relying on any paperwork or papers, has to do also just with obviously client service, which I think is increased when you have teams and you're able to seamlessly work in teams, but also being able to provide a client information that they want. And, we have, as Scott mentioned, we have the ability to create reports in a very quick and easy manner, in whatever manner the client wants them in, but also, I'll give you an example. Just recently, I had a client that was acquired. And so the acquiring company wanted the files, and they also wanted some correspondence that went back and forth, so it wasn't just we want all the most important documents. It was, we want everything. And I remember the question from the acquiring company was, well, how long is it going to take you all to pull those files and to get them from storage and to get them to us, and who's going to pay for shipping and these types of questions. And, I was able to say, well, we can get them to you this afternoon. Who should we send them to? Because they're all digital. So being able to react to those types of client requests in such a quick and efficient manner, for my practice, I know has been, well, again, to say it's transformative, would be quite the understatement. So, Scott mentioned several tools, and I don't mean to minimize any of the tools, but the one I would say, for me anyway, that has been particularly revolutionizing is Foundation IP, we call FIP, right? And I was going to give a shout out to Steve on this. This was created in 2001, and Steve was one of the architects of FIP. And so to think back to what we were all doing in 2001, and to think that, Steve had the foresight to see what we needed, right, in order to work as a team and to be efficient and to all be able to get to the information so we can be looking at the same thing at the same time is really remarkable. So Steve, I did want to give you a shout out on this. One of my colleagues said the other day, what FIP has done, or systems like FIP, but I mean, I'm focusing on FIP here. It means that we no longer have to work on a file or work with docketing information or other things that are found in our systems. It's no longer a serial endeavor, right? It is something that we can all do at the same time, and it just makes a world of difference. Next slide, please. So, and Scott mentioned this as well, but FIP is not just a docketing system. So we do our time entry in FIP, we file documents, we have emails in FIP. And so everything that you need is in one place. So when you tell someone, I call someone in our Minneapolis office and I want them to work with us on a specific project, they literally are looking at the same screen I am, and it's not just, again, the docketing information that they are looking at, although they can easily get to that. They may be pulling up a document, they may be looking at how much time has already been spent on that particular matter, but it's all easily accessible and immediate. And again, we've mentioned this several times, it's just immediate access by anyone at any time. I was going to mention that, one of the things that I've, again, in this digital transformation, and, dating myself here somewhat, but, I grew up in a system where you wrote your time down on a timesheet and you gave it to the secretary, and the secretary would enter it into a billing system or time entry system, and then that would generate the bills. So, we can see, with FIP, we go in when we enter our time. So we are in a file. I've worked on something for that particular file. I enter my time right then. I don't have to write anything down, right? I am in the system. I'm entering my time at the same place as I'm looking at all the documents and all the other information, which means that I can also see who else has worked on it, how much of the budget that we've used up. Well, I can also see, have people been working on a file? Like if I am worried about, meeting a deadline, I can see immediately whether, how much progress, has been made. And then as well, for me, a huge time saver has been that I'm able to go in and tweak language that's in their billing language. so that maybe all of the billing entries conform, we're all calling a document the same thing, so that when the end of the month rolls around and I'm looking at, pre-bills, pre-invoices, everything has pretty much been changed or amended to my liking, so that when I'm looking at the bills, it's a quick review. So that's also been just very helpful and very efficient. The others, and I think you've heard this as well by several, is that the location of the folks that are working on these files is become just a non-issue. So there may be 4 people working on a file, and all of them in different states, different time zones, and it is it's immaterial. So that's been, to say it's been transformative, and it's been digitally transformative, but it's been transformative to my practice. It's been such an incredible advancement, for me and I think for our client service. Next slide, please. So, I think that talking about present day, right? I mean, I think our current situation is, not anything we all, really could have foreseen. But having gone through the digital transformation pre-COVID, when COVID hit and we all were then required to work remotely, was not really, well, for me, it meant sitting in a different chair. And I think but there wasn't really a workflow disruption. It wasn't a crisis from the standpoint of getting things done and out. And I've talked with lots of folks around the country who've not had such a good and seamless experience with firms that were not ready to make that change in an easy manner. I mean, they were on top of it, but it was something that really put a kink in workflow for weeks to get everything, to either get everything online or to get things to people that they needed in order to continue to work. So again, I think SLW certainly had an advantage because we were all really transformed already, and many of us worked remotely, to begin with. So I think that allowed for the flexibility, to work from home with little to no changes. The other thing I was going to mention is, as we see these different variants, we hear about them in the news. I've heard of many companies that are requiring their employees to go back, and then they go back, and then a few days after they're back, well, wait, we weren't aware this Delta variant was going to be so bad, so no, we don't want you here. So now we want you to work at home. And so with being, having gone through the digital transformation already, that type of flexibility for us is not a problem. We can work either place. It's not required that, because we have so many other tools as well, it's not required that we be in a physical location. So anyhow, and then, lastly, I was going to mention real quick on recruiting that, we were able to recruit, and Garth mentioned this, we have such a diverse, we're recruiting from diverse locations, but we also have teams that are interviewing that are very geographically diverse. So we're able to continue to recruit from anywhere, and we're able to offer this work environment flexibility that is becoming more important to folks. I think we've always had people who want to work remotely, and I think that's great. But I think that has just increased. The importance to people to be able to stay home if they want, if they feel safer, has been a real advantage for us. Next slide, please. And really, hand in hand with the recruiting is really just the mentoring. So, we've been able pre-pandemic to mentor folks on the team who are in other states or in other locations. But to be able to continue to offer that, it's been, again, uninterrupted and seamless. And, we have more people that we're, interviewing now that ask questions about mentoring. Mentoring has always been important, but I think it's been even more of a focus over the last few years, and how important it is for candidates to know that they're going to a firm that can offer mentoring and continue, in a continuous way. So I think that's been also very advantageous for us. I feel like, the transformation that I've gone through and what my practice has gone through at SLW through the digital transformation has been, again, just transformative in so many ways, not just digitally, but just for so many ways for my clients. And I think I have a better practice and happier clients. Well, back to you, Steve.
Hey, thanks, Pam. That was really, really good. And it's always good to get perspective, from attorneys that have worked in different systems. And I want to thank you for all what you brought to our, team. We've especially, with, the mentoring and the diversity stuff is just critical these days. And during COVID, it's extremely difficult. So with that, I want to move to our final speaker, Tom Ernstner, who is by far and away the most learned person I know on IT in the entire universe. He does claim to be something like the galactical, head of galactical IT or something. I forget, Tom, what was your term? You can share that with everybody.
Like your supreme leader? No, I don't know. But
that's okay.
Yeah, set me up for a good fall here.
we need some good humor to finish it off. But Tom, rip away.
All right, thanks, Steve. Okay, so as I was putting this presentation together, I thought, well, a lot of us and a lot of firms are using a lot of these tools now. Some are still behind, but many are using a lot of collaboration tools already. They've been forced to. So what I thought I would do is maybe spend a little bit of time about how we train our attorneys and offer some practical tips or considerations for the tools that we do use. And so I think that's where I'm going to start with this. Again, our goal is to make our training personalized, succinct, and useful without overwhelming our attorney. We want to, introduce people to the content and teach them where to go to dig deeper. And so that's how we'll go. So next slide, if you can. All right, thank you. So, obviously a lot of us are already using things like Teams, Zoom, or WebEx. In our case, we use Zoom and Teams quite a bit here at SLW. And so some of the practical things you might want to consider when using these to train attorneys, or even as you're tying back into Garth, as you're talking about recruits, you might want to ask the recruits or give them a little bit of advice on what tools you're using to interview them, so they can take a little time to prepare, make sure they have the microphones or the webcams that they need, things like that. But on top of that, do you have a program to offer the equipment to allow the interactive training to occur? So think about things like that. I mean, do you have a stock microphone or headset that works well that you're familiar with for your firm? So those things shouldn't be taken lightly. Your IT team is always struggling to work with users if the users don't have the equipment they need. So consider that. As you're using Teams and Zoom or WebEx, record the session and offer the recording to the trainee, if you will. But understand how the recording works. In other words, if you're using Teams, for example, and you decide to use the whiteboard app or do some shared notes in Teams, know that the whiteboard and the shared notes are not going to be captured in the team recording. And then understand where the recording is going to be saved. Is it going to be saved into your personal OneDrive that you have to share later, or is it going to be saved up to Microsoft Streams? And I know Microsoft has been changing a lot of stuff in the backside on how that works in recent weeks, actually. So, but also understand your retention policies too. This stuff gets saved up in the cloud and it gets retained and may eventually be discoverable. Whether that matters to you or not, it's something to keep in mind. And consider your licensing levels. Not all Microsoft or Slack or Zoom licensing subscriptions are the same. They may or may not have things like transcription in that licensing. So watch out for that. As you're training people, make it a two-way conversation and give lots of opportunities for Q&A. You can always use things like in-meeting chat to augment or post links to more information. And then, of course, use screen sharing. These tools are great at screen sharing, right? So use the screen sharing. And what I like to do is I like to let the the attorney drive. Like we'll bring them up and kind of describe things, but they can drive. We'll share out the screen and say, here's the interface. You go ahead and drive. And then a subtle tip is just to turn on the webcam. We're all working remotely. We have a human need to communicate with each other. And anything we can do to bring that virtual presence closer together is good. So turn on the webcam and use that when you can. And I just want to touch base on what several of us have already stated, and especially Scott, and that is, we need that central, well-organized portal. So in our case, we use SharePoint Online, and that's our Milo system again. And that's you want to make sure it's a very well-organized environment and a simple place for people to come back to. So when you're covering the training, the attorney may digest and fully understand maybe 20% of what you're going to present. And so you need to offer them a resource or an easy way to get back to find more information. And that central portal is so critical in that regard. So have a central portal. But as you consider that central portal and you post documents or things up on that portal, consider whether that information is searchable and how easy it will be to find if someone gets lost in a menu structure somewhere. So, did you check the metadata on the document you uploaded? Did you OCR the PDF file? Did you include a transcript with the video? Things like that. Things that will make it textually searchable will always be very helpful too. Keep in mind that tools like Microsoft Streams, when you post a video to that, will or can transcribe and actually let a person jump just to the information in the video or the point in the video for the information that's pertinent to them. And that can be really, really handy rather than having someone wade through 15 minutes or an hour of something else just to see the one part in the video they wanted to find. Many of you who are avid YouTube viewers will understand that one well. Keep the information up to date, right? The information is posted in the central portal, but it's no good if it's not live and up to date. One way that we do it in our IT department is we present directly from the information in that central portal. So when my colleague Kelly is training a new attorney, she'll be actually using the central portal, the documents on the central portal. And that forces us to make sure that information stays up to date, but it also shows the attorney hands-on. This is where you can find the information in the how-to articles. The other thing I think Scott mentioned this too is SLW uses client-focused repositories. In this case, we have teams that are focused on clients, and we keep those teams looking very similar for a good reason, right? So we basically template our teams for our clients so they have the same look and feel as people jump into them. And it's a great place to go for client-specific information, like you need a template or some instructions on filing an application. That will be there for that particular client in that client-focused team in the files section or in the wiki or in the posts on the Microsoft team. But be aware once again of your firm's data retention requirements. If you put something in your chat, that chat might disappear. So when you are posting and using Teams, remember or at least ask your IT team or your compliance people, about your retention policies so you understand what will stick around and what won't. The other thing you can do too, and we do this here at SLW, is we have of course Yammer as part of the Microsoft suite, but you might have other wiki or blogging tools as well. But one thing we do in Yammer, they have this concept of groups or channels, if you will, and we feed those groups back into key areas on the Milo site on our central repository. So I, for example, could post a bit of a security warning or something to be awareness, or a tips. We have a group called Schwacks out there, which we call affectionately Schwacks anyway, but it's an area where people can post tips and tricks on how to do things, maybe use a certain editing tool that can be very efficient in helping us draft a claim or something. These things are really valuable, and you can feed those back into your central website as news feeds, where when people go to this Milo site, they can then go under the section, they can click on the news feed and then quickly go to that Yammer channel and pick up that information. So that's kind of a good way of integrating some of the different tools. So, don't be afraid, of course, to use external content. Of course, in the IT field, why reinvent the wheel? Microsoft has done a great job offering, and so other vendors as well, of many videos out there on YouTube or other media services or articles out there that may be real relevant to the user. So go ahead and post links to those and use those. And then the other thing you might want to consider too is a lot of firms are using security providers, or they have some sort of, security service, if you will, involved. One thing to do is to check with those providers and see if they have awareness or behavioral based training. For example, we use Mimecast as our main email filtering service. And Mimecast will also check the links on your email, so you don't, click on a link that drives you to a bad place and infects your computer. But every so many clicks, Mimecast will pop up and give you a little bit of a training episode where it'll say, hey, do you think this link is really safe or not? And if you say yes, and it's not safe, then they bring you through a little article that talks about, why it wasn't safe and what you should do the next time. So consider that behavioral based training, or include those include those security awareness training elements in your overall strategy as well. Understand your regulatory, insurance, and business requirements too as you're training too. You may have a need to track training attendance or test results for compliance reasons. For example, most firms now are required to have all their users take some basic cybersecurity training, and that attendance needs to be tracked often by the compliance people to meet certain security or regulatory guidelines. So, keep that in mind as you go through and look at your learning management systems. Do you have a way of tracking that attendance? Again, Susan referred to Cantola. We use Cantola also for some annual cybersecurity training, and she's able to then track who took the training and who didn't, so we can hold on to that information for our compliance folks. And then when you consider learning management systems, we use things like Talent LMS. Take a look at those learning management systems and see if they can integrate with your current collaboration platform. For example, Talent LMS can trigger a Teams or a Zoom meeting if you set that up in the system. So when people are in that system and they want to create a training session with multiple people, they can do that, and it'll pop Teams up and away you go. Don't forget about or minimize single sign-on. Use your integrations with your identity providers as much as you can to offer a seamless login experience. Make it easy for people to get into the tool, and fluid if you can. And then another caution here is to vet your training, right? If you're buying prepackaged training, vet your training. The training might include something that's going to drive a hidden IT cost or set false expectations that aren't applicable to your firm. So be aware of that. Consider ways in which you want to alert people if there's something going on, like there's an emergency of some sort. At SLW, we have a firm-wide Microsoft team where we can post important alerts and announcements, but we're still small enough where sometimes email, the good old email system, can work well. And so don't be bashful about that, but look at your environment and determine what works better for you. Consider providers such as Preparis or Alert Media. These are third-party providers that can send mobile, phone, text messages, or have robocalls call people, or even email people to alternative email addresses should something really be going on that you need to make sure people have an immediate notice on, especially now that we're diverse, of course, across the entire country and nation, and world for that matter. And if you have system generated alerts, so if you use data loss prevention technologies, many folks are in the Microsoft suite or, other suites, but oftentimes we'll have DLP solutions in place where they're tracking, people that might be putting credit card information in a file, and that doesn't, allow them to be, compliant. And so, consider turning on those alerts, but don't do it if the alerts are meaningless to the user, right? If the alerts say something cryptic, like sadly to say, many of the Microsoft ones do, it may not be worth turning it on because it might just create more background noise that then gets overlooked. And that's exactly what we don't want to have happen. We want people to pay attention to the alerts and ask questions when they see them. So make sure the alerts are pertinent. And then of course, when you're training, always the soft stuff, the white glove treatment, personalize and encourage and promote. You want to present tips or make announcement at your company or departmental meetings if you can. If you can offer virtual lunch and learns, it's great. You want to offer follow-up training or spend extra time for those that need more help. And we have, we're a high-tech firm, but attorneys are busy, and there may be tools that they just don't have time to sink their teeth into. And so you want to incentivize your help desk to teach and advise them to teach. The old adage of, teaching them to fish instead of feeding them a fish idea. So go down that road. And then finally, and one bullet point I didn't add here is, consider other tools and continue to innovate. Some things we've explored are tools like SaneBox for AI-based email organization. So many of us drown in email nowadays, and is there a way that you can make the email box meaningful again, practical again? And so there are tools out there to do that. Don't forget about your smartphone apps. On our accounting side, we use Concur. They have an app that lets me go ahead and scan in receipts for expenses, which saves a huge amount of time. Rather than trying to gather things in and scan them in, I can take my smartphone and my camera and just zap them right into the Concur expense application. So look at things like that. Those are things that have completely transformed how the accounting process has worked over the years as well. And of course, you always have your Office apps you can download on your iOS or Android device. Again, following your firm's compliance and mobile device management, requirements there. But you can often upload a picture or a file and do a lot of work right off your smartphone. Keeps you in touch and respond to things, giving people what they need when they need it. With that in mind, that's all I have.
Hey, thanks a lot, Tom. As always, you are a wealth of knowledge. We had one question that came in that we'll answer before we wrap up, which was really what other big changes or what other things are coming down the pike in this area, I guess, of digital transformation future. I will just kind of tee this up for the panel to add whatever they want. But, I think our experience, aside from, the continuous adoption of more and more tools to make things more efficient, protect our clients' information, et cetera, probably the biggest change is as we go more remote, even more than we've been in the past, and Schwegman's always been remote, in part, I think trying to figure out better ways to keep people connected on a regular basis, and especially when we're trying to bring new people into the firm and they don't know anybody and we don't have the benefit of personal, connections with, getting together in person. So that's, I think, I don't know what changes we're going to come up with to address that. I know Scott mentioned some things and we're working on, but anybody else want to jump in there and add something to that non-answer?
This is Scott. I think that one of the things that I think is a future consideration, and I don't know how it would be done exactly, but it would be essentially a dashboard for an attorney to be able to see their docket, add their billing, and get at the files they need in some sort of single page. That's kind of the key there, I think. But something that would make them even more efficient than the tools that we already have do right now.
In other words, there's so many places we've got information scattered around, trying to gather them all together, which we do to some degree, but we could do way better so that you're not chasing data. Anybody else want to add anything?
Yeah, this is Tom. I might say just kind of, the industry is collaborating, or I should say not collaborating, the industry is consolidating on basically three major providers. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for integration between the providers. Like, we have clients that are using the Google Workspace or the G Suite components. There could be good ways to innovate in those spaces of integrating calendaring or information across teams versus the G Suite components and things like that. So there's a lot of opportunities there, and I see that is going to be an area of growth.
And I just will add to that, just the extraordinary importance of having a systems, and especially in our practice, IP system, having IP systems that have open APIs that allow ready exchange of information or remote access to do transactions in the database. And I always like to mention that Foundation IP has a great API. AppCall has a good API. These are IP management systems. CPI has a good API. Patrick's is another good one. IP Folio has got good access. The other platforms are either more closed or just don't have the more modern APIs. So always be looking for those open APIs so that the data exchange, which takes a lot of time and introduces a lot of errors, can be greatly automated, and also the ecosystem can get connected better. Because FIP is like a rudimentary tool compared to where we're headed in the future. Anybody, Garth or anybody else have any comments? I guess we can wrap it up. We're over time by a good chunk. So
Yeah, nothing more from me. Thanks, Steve.
okay. All right. Hey, well, thanks everybody for attending, and thank the speakers for a really terrific job. A lot of thought went into that. I appreciate all the efforts, and turn it back to Michelle for maybe discuss our upcoming. Don't we have something on digital twins coming down the pike pretty soon?
Yeah, we sure do. Next week, we have a webinar about digital twins. And then next month, we have the next episode of the Practical Patent Practice webinar series. So we'd love to see you back for that.
And I think there's one other one called I think the Modern Prosecution Practice, which is in the making. So look for that one in the future too. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate attendance.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.